Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I see many familiar names, so welcome to all of you. Before we start, for those of you who are history buffs, I thought you might like to know that today is the day that Magna Carta was sealed by King John in 1215, and it's also Global Wind Day, which is a day that is celebrated on June 15th around the world to recognize wind power and how it can affect our future. Our event today, though, has nothing to do with Magna Carta or wind power. It has to do with how charities have adapted, survived, and thrived during the pandemic. And we have invited two of the leaders in the philanthropic sector to join us today. So I wanted to introduce Silvia Ugolini, who is the Principal Director of Gift Planning at Concordia University, and Tammy Garcia, who is the Philanthropy Director, Gifts and State Planning at Sunnybrook Foundation. So Sylvia and Tammy, thank you so much for joining us today. I've had the pleasure of working with both of you over the last few years, and you are both leaders in this field, so your views are very important to me and to our colleagues. So first of all, let me start by asking you, how have you and your team adapted to the new environment that has been created after the pandemic? Sylvia, maybe you want to start.
Sure, Tina. Well, I would say, I think initially with some trepidation, just disconnecting from the office totally and finding ourselves at a loss with what we were accustomed to having, a filing cabinet with documents under lock and key. And also, I think just as challenges of technology. For instance, our team did not use Zoom very much. I don't know about everyone else, but actually I never used it at all. So acclimatizing myself to using Zoom and including polls and making it interesting really had me pulling my hair out, trying to get up that learning curve. But I think it was very, very stimulating for all of us. And at one point, I think we managed to have this spirit of collegiality, and we were quite connected as a team. We had many all staff meetings, and I myself had check-ins with my own team.
Okay, great. And how about you, Tammy?
Yeah, overall, I have to say we adapted pretty well, given that prior to the pandemic, our culture was not remote work whatsoever. But when I think back, it's really interesting how we evolved and adapted throughout the year. At the beginning, the focus was on technology, almost making sure everyone had the right equipment and was able to access meetings. And it's funny, I remember, the first 3 weeks, we were still only using the foundation conference call line. And so we would call in, but it was so bogged down, you would have to dial 10 times before you were admitted. And so that was short-lived. We transitioned to Zoom after that. But it's interesting how it was really on technology. And then once we got all that sorted out, it became clear that we needed more opportunity for some check-in and some space where it wasn't meeting focused or agenda focused. Everyone was dealing with kids at home or different priorities, uncertainties in the world. So those check-in opportunities became a focus. And then we realized, there needed to be more social engagement activities across the foundation. So looking at trivia and creative ways to really engage the team. And then, that mental health and wellness theme seemed to be present throughout and still is, with leadership really talking about resources that are available and supports that are available. And also emphasizing that, people are working flex hours, so emails will be coming in at all hours and don't expect a response right away. So having that messaging from leadership, I think, was an important theme throughout the year. But interesting how we have evolved and adapted.
Fantastic. So I know the first few months of the pandemic definitely were very stressful for me and my team to try to adapt to the new environment. So I wanted to ask you, what sort of new technological tools and new procedures have you been using and implementing that have helped you be productive in this remote work environment? And before we start, actually, to our participant, I wanted to say, please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A segment, and we will get to all of your questions at the end of our discussion. So Sylvia, maybe you can talk about any technology tools and new procedures you've been using.
Technology, we've been using Teams internally, pretty much, and Zoom externally. I meant to say a little earlier that I think a benefit was that we seemed to really forget about geographic barriers. So there was an awful lot of international outreach that we otherwise would not have done. I think this was a real benefit from this pandemic as such. And procedure-wise, in terms of what I alluded to, the filing cabinet under lock and key, we created a centralized virtual filing cabinet, if you wish. So this has given us a sense of organization. We also had, in terms of procedure, I think we had a greater focus on pool management, qualification, stewardship changes, stages rather, and cleanup, which often when we're very busy, kind of gets neglected. I've always thought we needed time management tools to kind of address the pool. And this has given us a lot of time to go in terms of breadth and depth. And also what we had done was we had unit presentations to the different units within our department. So that really, I feel, helped to break down silos, to position ourselves and set out our needs and our goals and set out expectations and needs that we had from other units.
Okay, and how about you, Tammy?
In terms of tools, so we use Zoom at the foundation. We also, at the start of the pandemic, they had implemented this program called RIKE, and it is a sort of a project planning platform. So, in the office, we would typically have a folder with documents in for sign off, approval, and review, and you'd write on the folder and the sheet. So this program allowed us to do that digitally, which is much more effective and efficient, and you can then see where the document is, who's tracking it. So that was helpful. And then we also have we call it Digital Edge, but it's our space where we have all our donor files, procedures, reporting, foundation news. So this space became essential for everyone while we're working remote as our sort of hub and go-to. And then one thing I found really effective is, as a team, we were really feeling like we were missing out on those opportunities to just pop into someone's office and ask a quick question, or, those hallway chats where you have the chance to collaborate. So our directors created office hours for them virtually. So there was an hour where you could just pop in, and there would often be other people there. So you would just have to go in and wait your turn, but you would be listening to what other people were saying. And several times I had been in that meeting hour, heard what other people were saying, and was able to provide some insight and take it offline, and we were able to collaborate more. So again, offering that space for those spontaneous chats and collaborative moments that we're missing out on in the virtual world.
That is interesting in terms of the office hours. Are a lot of people taking up on those office hours and showing up?
Yeah, it's really successful, and I think it's caught on to other teams as well. So it's it's something maybe even in person you want to have, right? Just a set hour for people to.
Yeah.
That is true, that, you know, your doors are open and anybody can come in and ask questions. Very interesting. So of these new technologies, new procedures that you've started using in the last year, which ones do you think you will continue to use even when life goes, hopefully, back to normal? Tammy?
Sure, I think all of them really.
Mhm.
It's we're definitely have seen the value of them, and as we who knows what the future will bring, but there's a lot of talk about hybrid working models. So I think we've seen the value in all these virtual tools we've used this year. And just last week, actually, we had training on Zoom rooms where they have installed Zoom rooms into our meeting space within the office. So this will allow for high def video and audio for people while they're in the office. So someone remote can see and hear people in the meeting. So I think this is a sign where we're really moving towards having these tools and using them in our
On an ongoing
day-to-day.
basis. Very interesting. And how about you, Sylvia?
Definitely Zoom will have a place now for us, which it never did have. I don't know that it'll replace everything, but it will facilitate, I think, the utilization of time and efficiency. There has been something that came to my attention in a meeting with the new President Director General of the Quebec Financial Planning Teaching Institute called Miro, that I've actually suggested to the university. I found it, we had a 2.5-hour brainstorming meeting, and I found it very effective in terms of post-its, brainstorming, really effective breakout, more than breakout rooms that we see in Zoom. And I think that'll be a very interesting platform to discover. The chat feature in Teams has alleviated a lot of emails, so I can imagine I still have a challenge in terms of my inbox, but that has, I think it's positioned ourselves well in terms of kind of focus on actual golden hours of work. So I think that there are also filing mechanisms and sharing mechanisms within the Teams function now that will be very useful.
I love the chat function on Teams because I noticed that the biggest volume of emails that I was getting was from my assistant. So the more that we can communicate on Teams by chat, the less the inbox will be clogged. So this kind of leads me to my next question. What does the post-pandemic work environment, the ideal post-pandemic work environment look like to you? And does your organization have a clear vision of how it will look like? Sylvia?
It's a very timely question because we're dealing with this right now. And I think that the government mandating a back to campus, at least in Quebec, I imagine it's somewhat similar in other provinces, has sort of switched the focus from a very flexible orientation where people can do very well working at home to kind of let's get back to campus now. And we're working. I would say we're struggling right now with the hybrid model that will work and that will not create inequity, let's say, amongst people that hold the same titles but are doing things differently or manager discretion. I've always been a fan of the 4-day work week. I think the 7 best years of my life when I had my third child were working for 4 days, feeling I had a great work-life balance, very stimulated work-wise. I was promoted at that stage because I actually was more productive than the other men working 5 days rather. So I think that this will be an option to look at for young families and pre-retirees. The cost savings for the university in terms of what that would represent, I think is worth looking at. And as to clear vision, as I said again, I'm not sure we have clear vision. I think that the complexity around it is more challenging than we would have thought. We're right in the midst of it, so I can't pronounce myself concretely, but I look to have some flexibility especially with regards to donor visits. I'm not sure how we're going to handle that, whether we're going to encourage elderly donors to come into our offices at the university, or we will opt to have a day on the road to meet them, particularly outdoors when possible.
Well, there seems to be a bit of an internet issue with Sylvia. Tammy, why don't you chime in?
Yeah, along those lines, she was saying, not so sure there's a clear vision. There's a lot of questions and uncertainties at this point, but I think as an organization,
Sorry.
you're back, Sylvia.
You froze, I'm sorry.
Oh, my internet connection's unstable.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay, that's totally out of our control, no problem.
So I don't know where I was. Was it when, was I saying that?
Elderly donors, you were talking about elderly donors.
So I don't know whether we're going to encourage them to come in or actually opt to what I did, when I was in the executive counseling role in business and industry, would be calls on the road and kind of, when possible, meeting people outdoors in a cafe and not invite them into office. With regards to talent pool, I think that's what I was saying when I cut off was, I think we're going to have to realize that other employers are going to be offering a lot of flexibility. And if we want to attract and keep high-level talent where people are able to work very deeply at home and also manage a lot of juggling. I mean, this is presented, I think, people, I know myself anyway, I lend a lot of support to my mother and mother-in-law. So I've had that flexibility and people with children also, I think, have seen, it depends on the circumstances, of course, right? Mm-hmm. But the hybrid model in my mind is indispensable. And I can understand it can't be a free-for-all, but we haven't, we can't not seem as though we have not learned good practices from last year.
Mm-hmm. Good. So Tammy, you were starting to.
Yeah, just building on what you were saying is, there is a lot of uncertainties and unknowns, and I'm not sure we as an organization have a clear vision just yet, but we are working towards that hybrid model. That is the talk, obviously, with the Zoom rooms being implemented in our meeting rooms. We do have a working committee who's currently in real time talking about this and how it will work. But yeah, there's certainly benefits providing, as you said, Sylvia, people with the flexibility of that work-life balance with the hybrid model. And also our foundation, we want to grow and we don't have the space. So with the hybrid model, you can have that hoteling space option, which allows us to grow without needing to get more office space. But I think as we adapted and adjusted this year, it will be the same once this is implemented. Because as you said, how do we manage that? How is it perceived if someone's working from home and someone's in the office getting more face time with leaders? How do we ensure it's equal? So I think as this is implemented, it's going to be a learn as we go, as it was this year.
It is very interesting. I have clients in the technology sector who had adopted the work from home and remote working model way before the pandemic. And interestingly, most of them opted to work a few days in the office, even though they had the option of totally working remotely. They felt that they were being left out of the loop. They were not, a lot of the office politics that was going on, that it was not fair that, some employees were 100% in the office and some of them were fully remote. So yeah, just by choice, they opted to work at least a couple of days a week in the office and the rest. So I think the hybrid model probably will prevail. And how about your donors? How has communication with your donors been affected? What challenges have you had and what opportunities have you seen in the past year? Tammy, you go first this time.
Yeah, when I think of this past year, one of my favorite things out of this pandemic has really been the conversations I've had with donors. I think the quality of the conversations have been so meaningful. People are more vulnerable than they ever have been. I think people want to share, people want to connect, and people have had the time and have been home to connect. So I have made such wonderful connections over the phone with donors, and even I had one donor. He I had looked in his record. He had made a donation to COVID. So I was following up with him to thank him. He was one of my prospects. And, you know, I look in the record and I had tried 5 times to reach him previously with no success. So someone I'd probably look at moving on from, and connected with him. And he's been so engaged and was so engaged. I just hadn't had the chance to talk to him. And we've had such wonderful conversations throughout this year. So it was a good learning and reminder for me that, you know, don't stop at that 5, you know, that 5th attempt, because, you know, there are a couple, you never know, right? It's just finding that right timing to connect with them. And I think with, you know, our digital communications completely exploded this year, increased tenfold in how we communicate via email, the online donations. So the challenges or opportunities that brought for the Plan Giving team was really looking at where are we in that digital space? And I feel like we've always been a little bit behind. You know, it caused us to ensure we had all emails for our legacy donors, look at where PG is present on these digital online forums. And also our legacy giving materials, you know, historically it would just be pop them in the mail. So they don't really present that well in a digital email format. So now we're looking at things completely differently and ensuring that everything presents well digitally and over email, and that we have a strong presence over our web and online.
Good. And how about you, Sylvia? What have been the challenges?
I chime in, sorry, with Tammy. You know, there's been more human being to human being conversation in this newfound vulnerability. So that makes qualification calls less cold. Many check-ins. We did a lot of check-ins, really out of being courtesy calls and checking in on people. Lots and lots of stewardship. We did some small token deliveries with personalized notes to Heritage Society members, which I think they deeply appreciated, the same as we did when we received care packages from Concordia. You know, it's something out of the ordinary. Not many in my pool use Zoom. So I have to say, perhaps out of the rest of my colleagues in development, maybe I wasn't on Zoom as much with donors per se. On the other hand, Zoom fatigue probably presented, it was refreshing for me, if not for them, because we were on Zoom so much. I took walks with a couple of donors that I could when permissible, according to the, you know, the health guidelines. And I'd ring in on an elderly person and chat, me from the sidewalk and the person at the door. So that was kind of a friendly visit. I somewhat found it challenging to close gifts. And I don't know whether it was my sense of imposing, although even at that, we don't really close gifts in planned giving, right? The calendar is always the donors. But I may have been a little more hesitant to go there. And I found that delivering, you know, visual packaging material, I was very accustomed to have packages. And I could see that even when I called upon the faculties for some things, they were just not as available. So that will be a follow-up item as we go back for me. Accessing mail in a timely fashion was sometimes a challenge because we had to finally schedule people going in. So sometimes I felt I was a little bit behind in that way. But going back to the opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, the global outreach, like taking advantage of Spain and Italy going through horrible times at the very beginning, I never would have imagined, you know, reaching out to people. And, you know, I can do a personalized email in those languages, so that wasn't difficult for me, but I would never have thought of doing it. And it was fantastic because we profiled a lot of international alumni and they really appreciated it very much. That bond of the pandemic really was, reflected genuine concern, and so it was a way to bring them in. And then I have to say, donor motivation program this year was a big help for us because it was on the virtual sphere, and it helped bring donors to us as opposed to us going out to find them, the needles in the haystack.
That is true. And you have alumni all over Canada, obviously. And we've had people from coast to coast attending these sessions, which has created opportunities of starting a conversation. And even you, Tammy, I mean, you would think that a hospital, that most of your donors would be in your immediate community. But we did have one lady like from Barbados who joined us.
Exactly.
And, it really allows people to join from wherever they are. It eliminates the need not to have any meetings in the middle of the winter or when snowbirds are away, because they could join from Florida. And
exactly. And let's face it, some of those people won't come to events. They're just not event going people.
Very true. And distance can be a problem. And, we've had that issue with people who live in cities, let's say 1 to 1.5 hours away from Toronto, where it would take up more than half of your day to drive downtown, attend a meeting, go back. And now with these webinars, it's possible for them to join from anywhere, miss the traffic, get the information, and start acting on it. So it's been very liberating, I think, from that perspective, using this technology.
And winter amplifies those problems.
Yes, very true. Canadian winter.
Canadian.
Now, how did the pandemic affect your fundraising activities? Some organizations have been very hard hit. Some actually have been thriving, and some are in between, obviously. So how have you seen, what sort of an impact have you seen? Tammy?
Yeah, at the beginning of the pandemic, in terms of our planned giving activity, we sort of, it was, no one knew whether we should be talking to donors about this or how people were feeling. So it was all stewardship focused. And at that time, our COVID emergency response fund with our community engagement team was just through the roof. Like, the response from the community was incredible. So we had that happening, and which gave an opportunity for our planned giving team to steward any donors that were giving to the COVID fund, an opportunity to connect with them, which was great. So that first half was really stewardship. And then once we really learned that, people wanted to hear about planned giving and were interested in learning about planned giving, it was top of mind. We really continued with our cultivation mailings as well as our donor motivation virtual webinars. So that last half of the year, I would say our planned giving activity was as successful or a little more successful than previous years. In terms of our planned giving revenue, similar, that first half really slow. We weren't getting much revenue in, largely due to estate admin delays and whatnot. But then that last half, we finished off really strong, above average. So overall, with our COVID emergency fund and all our other revenue streams, other than events, they were probably in line with other years.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And how about you, Sylvia? Have you seen
so in terms of results, like monies realized from estates, it's difficult to comment because that differs from year to year. However, I've noticed that with the open estates, things are slower. I'm finding them slower to come in. I think that we've seen that in the financial institutions at large, whether it be from people buying homes and receiving, news. So I think there's a bit of a lag there that I hope will be changing. And although notaries and lawyers are super, super busy, and I think a lot of it is even in real estate, both in Toronto and Montreal, from the point of view of wills, they say people are on them. I can't say that I've seen a significant volume of commitments as a result of that or information received from them, although I have had 3. So I have to say, honestly, like I've had 3 come out of on different parts of Ontario. And we're tracking verbal commitments more diligently now, which really was left aside in the past. So I think that, you know, the fact that we always require proper documentation, and so we're either there or not there, the fact that we're looking at verbal commitments and focusing a lot of stewardship around that will certainly drive results. And as I said earlier, it's been a big year for me in qualification and stewardship, which we can never have enough of, right?
That is true. That's very true.
In a campaign, and we need to keep people close.
Very good. And have there been any new innovations that have helped you with your fundraising? Both of you talked about the webinars with Donor Motivation Program that I think definitely brought a new tool to the forefront. Anything else that has helped you when it comes to innovative ways of reaching out to your donors?
Tammy, do you want to go first?
Sure.
I think that probably more innovative.
Yeah, well, you know, what I keep thinking of, it's in an innovative way, maybe indirectly, but along the lines of all the webinars for donors, there's also been a tremendous amount of professional development that has been really accessible to our foundation because it's time effective and reasonably priced. And with all the talk out there on how we should be focusing on planned giving because it is stable revenue through times of economic crisis and times of uncertainty, and how donors are thinking about it, it really gave us the opportunity to emphasize the importance amongst our major gift team and our board. So we really leveraged these resources and materials and shared it with our team and our board. We had our board champion present to our board about the importance of legacy giving. And as a result, we had 4 confirmations this year from the board, which is a great success. Nice. And then incorporating it into our major gift team has been sort of an ongoing conversation, and this year allowed for a bit more opportunity there. And we certainly had some wins with people being more open to talking about it and getting some wins with some legacy confirmations. So that was an area that we really leveraged because there were so many resources that were accessible. And then the digital space, we really leveraged our digital stewardship reports, so made them more interactive, and being digital, you can share them with a wider audience than our printing mailing. And we also use digital in the sense of we allow donors to share messages to the frontline staff as a way of interacting and getting them to share some positive messages to the frontline staff at the hospital.
That's interesting. Very interesting. And how about you, Sylvia?
Well, I'll go back to the donor motivation program is probably the biggest innovation for me. So because that was new to us. So that was definitely innovation, which led to an uptake on engagement. People that had lapsed or people that were not responsive, as Tammy mentioned, you know, you reach out, but they're not responsive, actually came to us and some very good leaders, particularly in the area of athletics and recreation. So that's resulted in a pilot bus campaign that I will be leading this year. Also finding the millionaire next door, you know, you're just chatting with someone and thinking nothing of it. I'm thinking, oh, I'm going nowhere with this. And suddenly I say something about the presentation and the person says, yeah, I have a 3.65 million capital gains problem. Like, okay, so that's a capital gains problem, not a net worth. Or someone that, you know, is sort of very, the people that pass unnoticed and, you know, has a $7 million liquid portfolio, no children, no spouse. So those were very good surprises, and we learned a lot from the tried and true formula there. The deliveries, the personal deliveries were really good because we generally hold a Heritage Society event annually, and so what happens is local. It's Montreal. Some people come, at best, maybe some Torontonians or people close by will come in for a long weekend and attend, depending on when we position it. But this way, we sent this like through North America. We sent these little things, and it was a very unifying, I think, effort, and we received a lot of positive comments. Also, more social media focus, as Tammy said. That definitely. I think that we really realized having a profile there, always networking with advisors, but even more so this year, and sharing commonalities. And although not pronounced, I would say there's been more integration with the development officers, more so with some than others. But I think that there were greater expectations from leaders this year in terms of plan giving. They were counting on plan giving because no one knew what to expect. So this allowed me to mentor a few people and to really connect with them. Strangely enough, I found the connection stronger, even though we weren't, because we are separated. Some of us are in central office and some in faculties. And this way, we're a team chat away. So we actually, I think, connected more often and used the opportunity to look at blended gifts more often. And I had a greater usage of email merge. I don't think I've ever sent so many email merges, simply to be out there and touch base with people. So as I said earlier, breadth and depth.
And Sylvia, you had invited me to an online wine appreciation event that yes. Concordia did. I thought that was very innovative because you don't see that from many charities. No. There was no talk about donations, nothing. It was just a donor appreciation event, really. And you had invited alumni and, people who were connected with the university. So I thought that was a really good use of technology and a great way of connecting with your donors. So thank you so much to both of you. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it down in the Q&A for us. I really enjoyed talking to Sylvia and Tammy and hearing about their insights. And I also want to invite all of you. We're going to have an event in July called the Top 10 Critical Planned Giving Challenges and how to overcome them. So we do a white paper every year about challenges faced by nonprofits and charities across North America, and we share the results with all of you. The event is going to be held on July 12th. And Fiona, could you move to the next slide? Yeah, it's on, July 20th. At 11 a.m., about the same time that we are holding this event here. And, we'd love it if you would join us, and you will get an invitation soon by email. And this event does qualify for CFRE credits as well. So don't forget to apply for your CFRE credits. And again, we will send you the link afterwards, and we will do, I guess, Fiona, are we doing a quick poll about the next exclusive webinar? Yeah, so let us know if you want to attend the Top 10 Critical Plan Giving Challenges and how to overcome them webinar on July 20th, yes or no, and then, we will send you your exclusive invitation. So please take a few seconds and answer the poll. Okay, thanks very much for participating in this poll. And again, as I said, don't forget to apply for your CFRE credits. We will be sending a link to you. And thanks again to all of you for spending time with us this morning, and a huge thank you to Sylvia and Tammy for their time and their valuable insights. Thank you. Bye-bye.